All right, folks. According to the laptop in front of me, it is now 5:30. Welcome to our audiobook creative process panel. With a round of applause, how are we feeling right now? Well, we all know who you came here to listen to, so I will make this quick. My name is Kayla. I'm also the master of the deck. I'll be moderating tonight, which means that I will be not talking and letting them talk. For tonight's for it is tonight. It's nighttime, basically. It's PM. Am I allowed to say that? Sure. 4:10 this afternoon's panel. They'll be talking about the audiobook creative process, and they have some stuff prepared to tell you, get some bare bones out of the way, and then we will turn it over to our floating mic, and you will be able to ask any questions that you might have about the audiobook creative process. And so, without further ado, Michael and Kate.
Thank you, Kayla. Let's take a minute to make sure that you can hear us. Are we coming across via the mic? Is it a pleasant level?
You can hear it well? Great. Okay.
Okay. So we both wrote out what we understand to be the sort of overview, and we came up with two different things. So I'm going to read mine first, and then Michael will read his, which is he focused more on the inhabiting of the story, the sort of creative part of the narrative process. And what I did was sort of go from soup to nuts, including the technical aspects. So this is uber nerdy, technical, geeky details. It's a lot of it is like the boring grind part of doing audiobooks. So the very, very first thing that happens is you get offered a book. So you agree to do the narration. You confirm the due date by which you will have delivered all of the audio files. We also work with independent authors who self-publish. And so if it's one of those instances, then we contact our on-call engineer and we say, Eric, are you available? Here's the potential due date. And he says, yes. He always says yes. And we're good. We ask to receive the book in PDF form because we use an app called Goodreader on our iPads to read in the booth. It didn't always used to be like that. We used to have paper books, which are very difficult to silently turn pages. And after we had published paper books, we would have galleys. So we would have big manuscript sheets of paper, regular size print paper, a stack this big, and we would, again, have to silently turn pages. And if there was a rewrite, while you were recording, you would get an entire new galley. So in 6 months, we would have a stack of paper as tall as I am. First time reading the book. You read the book through to yourself, silently. You're looking at the plot, the characters, the tone, the rhythm, the mood. You're looking for names and pronunciations. There's a feature in Goodreader where I can highlight names, I can underline typos, and I can email myself a summary of the file. So what arrives, I copy all of that, I paste it into Pages, I then paste that into Numbers to create a spreadsheet. I sort ascending so that I can select everything I don't need and delete it. And what I'm left with is a spreadsheet that has the names I need to figure out pronunciations for and any typos that I've noted. And the typos I need to send to either the self-publishing author or the commercial publisher to sort of say, not going to read this as written because it doesn't make any sense, it's incorrect, whatever. And then we have to negotiate about how we fix the text. You look up words you don't know. I recently had an instance where an author used the word to describe the sad sigh of a dragon. He said, with a faint air of obstication. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I don't know that word. I looked it up. It means chronic constipation, fatal. No, he was not.
No one has a faint air.
It is deathly, fatal constipation. So I wrote to the publisher and I said, I'm not reading this word. I'm cutting that part of the phrase. It means to be fatally constipated. I don't think the dragon is fatally constipated. And wouldn't you know, it came back on the correction sheet as you missed this phrase. And I was like, yes, and it means fatally constipated, and I'm not reading it. So you may or may not have to consult with the publisher or the author in your prep work if you come across these things. That's all done. Then you actually get in the booth. In the booth, you wear silent clothing. I cannot stress how important that is. He cannot wear this shirt because his stubble scrapes against the collar and is picked up by the microphone and makes a noise. I wear t-shirts and jeans, knits. They're quiet. I can't wear anything that is like stiff cotton, anything that rustles, hiking shorts, ripstop, nylon, dead. No, not happening. I always have a glass of water. Temperature is pretty comfortable in our booths. We do have an extractor fan that is always running. It's very, very quiet, and it sucks out the warm air from the top of the booth. And then the air-conditioned air in the room of our studio comes in through the vent low down on the wall. The software that we use is called Pro Tools. And so when you're starting a new book, you set up a new session on Pro Tools, you name it, you save it to documents. In that session, if you have an idea of how long the book is, you select how many tracks you think you're going to need. I usually start with 10 or 15. You can always add more. And then you have to make sure that they all have the correct input, output, and then you make them all go away except the very first one. That's the one you're working on. And then you select the right, you put it into, yes, I need output for this, hit record, and you're ready to start. That point is when you start reading the book. So all of that work that happened before the very, very first sentence that you read, that is a huge part. The better you do that work, the better you can do the work in the booth. So you start reading. Watch for loud breaths, mouth noises, stomach gurgles, outside noises. In our studio, you cannot walk heavily in the kitchen because that is right over our studio. And although it's very nicely soundproof, nothing is really soundproof. And there isn't enough height between the ceiling of the studio and the floor of the kitchen to really be able to put soundproofing mitigation in there. So it's just a given that you don't wear shoes in the kitchen and that you walk like a ninja. And we have, over the course of raising our two children, traumatized/trained them so well that even today, as grown-ass adults, when they come and visit us and they're in our house, they'll be walking normally towards the kitchen. They hit that threshold and it's ninja. They just do it, which is great. Immerse yourself in the story. Read it as though you're reading it for the first time. Now that you've done all that prep, let that go. Be in the story for the first time. Follow the tone the author sets. Be sensitive to the author's voice. Note the punctuation, the breaks on the page. That's your guideline for rhythm and pace. When there's a break, and we're talking about good writers, not bad writers, right? I want to make the assumption that everybody is a good writer. And so I believe that they're choosing their punctuation, they're choosing their breaks. If there's a break, it's usually because the author knows the listener needs time to absorb what's just come. So you don't rush through those breaks. You pay attention to how the scene is set. The description of a place is a hugely important part of the world building. No matter what the genre is, you are bringing the listener into this world and you're giving them clues as to how to feel about this world by the description of, it's a scary, dangerous alley. It's a gorgeous Georgian house. Whatever the place is, that tells you how to anticipate what you're going to encounter there. The description of the people and the creatures who speak is a guideline for their voices. Good writers will give you multiple clues so that as a listener, you're not surprised by how they speak, when they speak. And as a narrator, you have all this information so that you have a chance to sort of understand that character and inhabit that character so that when you open your mouth, you don't pre-plan it. I don't, because to me, that's an artificial way of making a decision. I like to be in the moment and I'm going up that ramp and there's all this description and I'm in that character's body and I open my mouth and I say the first line. And at this point in my career, 9 times out of 10, it's like, yes, we're going with that. And then there'll be that time when I'm like, yeah, no, that is wrong, 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 wrong. Feels wrong, sounds wrong, doesn't serve the character, doesn't do what the author is wanting to do. And then I have to go back and then I have to think about it and then I have to try again. Follow your instinct for voices based on how they are described, how they make others feel, and what their role is in the story. Follow the story arcs. There's always multiple arcs, whether it's by chapter or not, so that you start to get a sense. And once you've recorded multiple books by an author, you know how they think, you know how they structure their books, and you understand where's the beginning, where's the middle, and where's the end. It can be very, very short. And of course, the entire book has a beginning, middle, end. But that's broken up into multiple arcs. Be sensitive to that. Go outside your comfort zone. Be ridiculous. Because real people are extraordinarily unique. And there is a really nasty tendency in commercial storytelling to make everybody bland. I don't know if you have this experience of reading a book and finding the characters incredibly colorful, and then they make a movie and you're like, these people are boring, right? So don't be afraid to sound ridiculous. And that's one of the hardest things for people to do because we are so often shamed for sounding ridiculous. But most of the time, if you're sounding a little ridiculous or a lot ridiculous and it's called for in the script, you're doing what the author wanted you to do. So that's key. Care about the outcome. You have to be invested in the story. You have to be invested in the characters. Not judging, invested. So that your being is engaged in serving the story. There have been plenty of times I have had to read a book that I maybe didn't think was that great. I still have to find a way to be invested in it. I have to relate to the characters and I have to serve that book and that author, even if I despise the author and the product that they produce, the story that they tell. There are, I remember one time, I'm not going to name these authors, but I was doing a sort of forensic procedural detective story, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And he was doing, how would you describe, without keeping it anonymous, how would you describe that book?
Um, uh,
Sort of action.
well, it was action, but it's also what I call injury,
Fetish.
fetish porn, almost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not straight up porn by any means.
No,
but
gore
just,
porn,
but pain porn.
pain porn.
Pain porn.
And it was so hard because I had to serve this author and I hated what they had done. And Michael and I would emerge from our booths
Go take a shower.
and we would like
Honest to
meet
God.
each other in the kitchen and be like, I just feel
Take a shower.
gross. I just feel gross
Yeah.
because my being has been in service to this thing that I don't think should exist because it's unhealthy. I don't do those books anymore. Be sensitive to the author's voice. There are so many clues that they give you over the course of the book, how to deliver the material. So you just have to like dial up your sensitivity so that you can serve them. Encounter the story as if for the first time, the way the reader does. And what that really means is when you read a book, there may be times, if you're reading a print book, when you read a passage and then you're like, wait, what? And you go back. Well, you can't do that when you're narrating, but you can understand when a passage is really complicated and you can help lay it out so that when they get to that, the listener gets to that passage, they don't have the need to rewind and listen to that passage again. That's one way of being sensitive to the author's voice. Be aware of all the factual information you've gathered and then release into the story. Trust yourself. Take breaks I usually take breaks every hour and a half to 2 hours. The normal ratio of time in the booth to time recorded is between 2 and 3 hours for every hour. If you're in the zone, I swear to God, I recorded an hour and 40 minutes once.
Didn't happen. It was an hour 10.
But really, if you're in the zone, you don't make mistakes. You don't stumble. I can scroll pages on the PDF reader that don't make a sound. I'm wearing silent clothing. My stomach doesn't rumble. I'm in the zone. I'm just like jogging or sprinting or skipping or whatever through the story, and I don't make mistakes. And then I get to the end of a chapter or something and I go, I lost all sense of time passing. That's the dream. That feels so delicious. Every day, between 3 and 5 hours total in the booth. Much more than that, and I have done a whole lot more than that when I've had a crunch situation with a last minute book assignment and a due date that is impossible, and then you rise to the challenge and you say, yes, I will have a 12-hour day in the booth. I will produce 4 hours, and then you're dead. But it's difficult because the first thing to go is the brain. Your brain turns to mush. You misread, you stumble, your mouth stops cooperating, and it just becomes less and less productive. So I like to be very productive and very efficient and do a little bit every day. The technical side, I have a sheet of paper where I note each track, the length, the page numbers, and what I named that track. So with Pro Tools, when you get to the end of a track, whether it's a chapter file or multiple chapters in one file, you get to the end and you select all, And then you hit create fades, which is such a lovely thing. Because it has nothing to do with the Wheel of Time fades, but it makes me laugh every time I do that. I'm creating fades. So what a fade in this sense does is every time you punch in to start recording, there's a little tiny click. And when you apply fades, it goes through the entire track and it smooths out, it silences all those little clicks. It's like maybe 10 microseconds long that it just depresses any noise. Because what we do is called punch roll. So you start recording and you read until you make a mistake. And you make a mistake and you stop. And you go back to the sentence before the one in which you made the mistake. You hit play, you listen to the playback. When you get to the period, and if you were paying attention, you made sure to leave a little space before you took a breath. After the period, you hit record, and that's where you start recording again. That's called punch roll. After you've created fades, you consolidate the track, which means your track is a series of multiple clips. It stitches them all together and creates one seamless track. Then you name that, and publishers have various naming conventions that can be really tedious to have to write out each time, but that's the way we live. And once your track is named, it is in your program, it's saved as a WAV file. And again, there are multiple different ways of sending that file to the publisher. So when we work with our independent authors who are self-publishing and our on-call engineer who's wonderful, whose name is Eric Sinistvet, we create a shared Dropbox folder and we upload the file to that Dropbox folder so that Eric can start doing the proofing. With publishing companies, we're either using an FTP file sharing protocol where we have to log in to their FTP and upload the file, or some of the publishers use Box. Similar thing, you're uploading a file to that. Once you have finished the narration of the book and you've sent all these audio files off to the publisher or our engineer, they proof the book. They read the book and listen, and they note all of the embarrassing, stupid mistakes you made. And then they create a spreadsheet compounding the insult to the injury. And they send you that spreadsheet and they say, you have 3,542 mistakes. That's usually not that many. So when you get the corrections from the proofer, they will send you voice clips. So every mistake you made, they'll send you that voice clip with the mistake on it. So you have to sit in your correction session and listen to all the mistakes you made. That's so that you have a voice match. So you listen to the correction clip and you know what your tone of voice was, who's speaking, how to deliver this sentence. And you reread the sentence. And what's fascinating about the way the brain works is a lot of times you are reading the correct sentence. You have that in print form. You're looking at that. You listen to the mistake you made. You're looking at the correct sentence. You go to record it again and you repeat what you just heard. I can't tell you how many times that happens. It's just a brain thing. And it's a fascinating sort of visual oral aspect of how it works. Once you have finished doing the corrections, you send that in, then you're done with the book. And the only remaining thing is for the engineer to tell you what the total runtime of the book is. That is what you use to invoice. because you know what your rate is that they are paying you per finished hour, and you need the total runtime to be able to write out your invoice, send them your invoice saying, you now owe me this much money because the book was 9.283 hours long. Over to you.
Okay. All right, this is a little bit more on the creative side. And I'm going to do two things right up front. The first thing is you have to remember the goal, and the goal is always to tell the story. So if I ever raise the goal is, great. I'm going to use two kind of metaphors because I think they illustrate some things better than others. So this is narrating a book is very much like being a musician and playing a score. You're doing the same thing. You have these symbols in front of you, which are two-dimensional, and you are moving it from a visual medium to an oral medium. And the other one I'm going to do is I'll use a film, because very much like a narrative section in a film, that can be what you're describing. But close-ups are a whole nother animal. So there's ways the camera moves that mirrors the way things are written. So bear with me. All right. First thing, read the book. When I read the book, I might have a highlighter, but I basically just try to read the book like a fan. Like this, I am so excited to be reading this book, and I try to have as few distractions as possible because I want to capture that emotional. How is this story gripping me? How am I coming into this story? Okay, we're going to go after you. I will just briefly kind of notate as I go through. I will briefly. Okay, I'll briefly try to notate, words that I'll have to look up, but I don't want them to interrupt the flow of the story because that is what I'm really trying to capture. So, what's the tone of the story of a section, of a chapter, of a paragraph? Because it comes down to that oftentimes. How is or was my imagination engaged with reading this piece? Is it because, there's an orphan and I'm attracted to him, or is it because there's this and it's repelling me? Is it an action sequence that, wow, it's really exciting, I wanted to do that? Keep those things in the back of your head. What is the emotional hook or the element that drew you in? How and when in the story? I know for a fact that when I started The Eye of the World, I was like, Trollocs, oh my God, and bam, from that point on, it was downhill. What is the overall shape of the story? And in that regard, is this a story that's a long, slow build-up? Is this a series of quick action, slam, bam, slam, bam, slam, bam things? That will tell you the tone that you're going to need to take. Keep that in mind. What are the main elements that move the story? Is this a character-driven thing where I'm inside somebody's mind and I'm going through his thought process and spinning in that world? Or is it, no, this is an action thing where I've got, things flying at me? Is this a story where I want to just be a languid stroll through the forest and I want to take in every little thing I'm encountering in a way that's not rushed, just relax. The audience or the reader, the authors is giving me cheesecake, and I can't just wolf down cheesecake. I want to savor cheesecake. I want to drink that glass of wine, and I want the cinnamon and the raspberry and the oak and the chocolate. I want all those things to come in. Or is it, character driven? What are the characteristics of the construction? So the sentence structure, the syntax structure, is it short? We have like 5-word sentences. It's simple. Or is this a Proust where you've got a paragraph that goes next page? Okay, there's the end of the paragraph. How do you structure that? Rapid fire Hemingway, where you've got, maybe 8 words, maybe 10 words, maybe 20. That's a big sentence for him. That's how he's moving it. Are they complex? Is it period specific? Is the construction in a way that tells you, oh, this is written in the 19th century? Is this, rather than saying no, or pardon my French, fuck no, or, in this occasion, upon your request for me to answer your question, I think that I must consider all these things in decline. It's like, what kind of elaborate thing? And that will tell you a tone to take. Is the vocabulary simple, common, esoteric, period, polite, blunt, scientific? These are all things that will tell you how you want to approach this. And that's also one of the things in terms of the writing. Is this a book that's full of nickel words, quarter words, or has this got a lot of $5, $10 words in it? And sometimes when you're in that book, this is nickel dime, nickel dime. What the hell is that $10 word doing there? That's when you want to call up the author. Did you read? This is when obfuscation. I think the author might have been obfuscated at that point. But be aware of that, because those are hints as to who the character is, or what tone of voice you need to take. Is it dialogue driven? There have been books where the whole book is literally just dialogue. That's a different feel from a narrative driven book. And what's the contrast? Is the author using dialogue to move the action? Is he using the narrative voice to move the action? And how are they doing that? Are they similar, or are they in contrast to each other? That will tell you partly volume choices that you're going to make, but also in many cases, I find that the narrative has one volume, and then all of a sudden the dialogue will pop just a bit, because that's the color, that's the exciting part. What's the POV? Is it first person? Is it third person? Is it a singular POV? Is it multiple POVs? All those things can affect how you're going to approach the whole book or a section of the book.
Point of view.
Yeah, point of view. And then what's the setting? Is it modern? Is it fantasy? Is it period? You will take a different tone depending on what period it's written in. Character and narrative voices. How important is character to the form of the? So, wow. Okay. So, if you've read Donald E. Westlake, sometimes he'll take a page and a half all of a sudden to describe a security guard, and you're like, what's that about? Well, he's setting you up. So you take your time with it. Don't rush through it. Other times it's like, it's a security guard. Let's just we know what it is. The action is moving. What is the author trying to do with that? That also tells you how full or how peculiar a character voice you can choose. Because the one thing you want to do as a narrator is disappear. You want to be the lens through which the author's ideas are communicated to the reader. And if you're putting rose-colored glasses on to do that, you're changing how the reader is going to perceive it. So you want to disappear to the degree that you can, so that it's like our goal with Wheel of Time was, it's Robert Jordan you're listening to. It's not Kate Redding and Michael Kramer. Yeah, if the text demands that I've got to do some loyal voice or whatever, great, fine. But I'm not trying to call attention to myself other than to fulfill the wishes of the story. So look at how that security guard is being used. And there are times when, you can have a lot of fun with that guy, because he had a bad day, and I had this bologna sandwich that my wife gave me, and that's wonderful, because then he gets shot, and oh my God, what's the emotional feeling to that? Probably good. So and then how you can find the voices for the characters. And this is also true for the narrative voice, because as Kate said, the author's voice is always there. Whether it's first person or third person, the author's voice is there. So it's a question of where is that author speaking directly to you, speaking to the audience. So physicality, posture, age, voice, accent, upbringing, class, attitude, vocabulary, sentence construction, and syntax that they use in their thinking, period, society, and personality. All those things can influence. And I would say you need to visualize that character, just like you need to visualize the scene. If they're talking about a forest and you're not seeing a forest, nobody's going to see a forest. They're just going to hear forest. But if you've got a forest, doesn't matter, whatever you're thinking, that's going to come out some way in this instrument that you have. Okay? So then we get to pacing. Is it action? Is it humor? Humor is the hardest, other than poetry, humor will be the hardest thing to narrate. And I say that because, and the difference is, like, for instance, last night, tons of humor in that piece. And you guys were responding to it. Well, you weren't there in the booth when we were recording it. How was I to? That's a joke. So you have to be ahead of the game in that regard and figure out where's the joke. And you have to invite that response in, even though you have to imagine the audience. So it's a very delicate balance of letting the joke breathe so that, hey, everybody, that was a joke. And I know you get it, but I'm not going to sit here and hold and wait for that laugh, because then you're going to go, what the hell's going on? Dead air. We hate dead air. Trucks drive through dead air. So it's a tricky thing to invite that response, to let the listener know, hey, you can laugh here without having to hit pause. And yet the story, the momentum of the story moves forward. And so that's why 9 times out of 10, it's very difficult. I find humor the hardest just because you're gauging that response. And sometimes you're laughing, which doesn't work because, so that's it. Is it mystery? To what degree do you want to kind of leave things just floating out there so that all of the mind can just, again, you want to invite the imagination of the listener, the reader, into this story. And that sometimes means, okay, I'm going to lay it out in a way that you can choose if that fog feels menacing or not. And then what's the next thing that's going to happen? And tension. Is it taut? Is it languid? And this is where I will talk about the breath. When we speak, we breathe, obviously. And if I keep speaking and speaking and speaking, and I don't inhale at all, and I keep talking to you, and I keep talking to you, when the hell is he going to breathe? Because he has to breathe pretty soon, because otherwise he's going to die. And the tension goes, and it goes, and it goes, and it goes. Tension just left. So there are times when you want to take that breath away from the mic. There are times when you don't want to start a sentence and get to the rest of it by putting a breath in the middle of it, because you know what? That's an arc. And you just stopped in the middle of that arch, and those words are going to go fall flat on the, and the listener is going to go, what's the rest of the sentence? And even though it's a tiny, tiny thing, you need to tell the story in a way that allows the listener to keep that momentum going. And if they have to stop to figure out what you mean, that's not what the author wanted. And that's the difference between oral and visual. Um, last thing, well, the last thing in this is, what is my orchestra? What is my arsenal? And we're going to go to the music here. So we've all heard a Beatles tune, Let It Be, and we've heard the Muzak version of that, and we've heard orchestral versions of that. Those are all successful renderings of that piece of music. They work. They do. If you've all heard, who knows Two Cellos? Okay, so Two Cellos covers In the Jungle by what, Guns N' Roses, is it? If you've ever heard Guns N' Roses, that's a great song. But you know what? You can do it without the vocals. You can make that work. You, as a narrator, have this instrument, and it can be very limited in terms of, you might have an octave, you might have 2 octaves. If you're my son, you have 3 octaves, maybe more, of voice that you can use. And you have to choose how you're going to orchestrate this piece, very much like looking at a piece of music. Am I going to use cellos and violins and flutes? Am I going to use trombones and cymbals? Am I going to use cannons? How am I going to do this? And you need, part of it is, what do I have? Damn, I don't have any cannons. Okay. I can still do the overture of 1812. I'll figure out something. But if I've got the cannons, I want to use them. But there are times when you're not going to do cannons with a Bach minuet. I mean, it's just not going to work. So you have to figure out, how am I going to do this piece that works with what I have? And that's where training and practice and education comes in, because the more we trained as actors, or at least as theater people, and that's one way to access both the emotional qualities we have, but also how we use our voices in ways that can be sustained. And so when that training is just allows you to, it just makes your orchestra bigger. I've got trombones, I've got cellos, I've got flutes, I've got it all. Maybe not, but you have to make those choices. And sometimes it's like, those are hard choices to make. Sometimes you have to look at a book and go, I really shouldn't do this. So for instance, if I got a children's book, it's like, this really needs a timbre of voice that, I mean, I can do the story, I can read the story, but it'd be better served by a higher voice, by a lighter voice, by a different voice. But Peter Falk, Princess Bride, you can do it and you can make it work. But those are the things you need to think. The other thing, I think, I'm going to end with 2 thoughts, and that is, if you're encountering a book, especially if it's in a period you don't know, watch movies, watch television, steal. Stealing is totally permitted. No, I mean, because if there's an accent that you don't know, listen, rent that movie, watch it, put it on a loop, because you might as well expand. Don't say, oh, I can't do it because I can't do an Irish accent. You can. It might be work, and those particular. I mean, I wouldn't do a book that's first person Irish if you don't have that. But to encounter a book that's got 20 lines with an Irish accent, you can do that. It might take you a while to get through those lines, but the next time you do a book that encounters that, hey, you're just that much more prepared. Oh, one other thing. Sleep. Sleep is the most important thing. It heals the voice better than anything else. It allows you to play, because that's what you're really doing, because you want to. Right. And to tell the story, you need to play. You are a musician in there reading a score. You're improvising a score, because that's what it is. and you're doing it, in if you can do it for an hour and a half, if you can get an hour and a half done in 3 hours or 4 hours or 5 hours, that's great. That is fantastic, because that's what you're doing. You are a musician and you've just improvised from a score for 5 hours. How exhausting is that? Go outside, pat yourself on the back, see the deer in the distance, take your glasses off, because you know what? You got to get your eyes to go back out there. But that's what you need to do. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you, Michael. And everyone, we have about 10 minutes for questions from the audience. So just a reminder, please wait for the actual floating mic to be in your hand and at your face so that you can be heard. And questions are available to be about generally everything, but remember the panel topic is about the creative process specifically. So if you just want to ask them about their favorite color, maybe wait until later. And drink when you ask.
I know the two of you, first of all, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. But I know the two of you get to work together from time to time on, on the Wheel of Time as an example. I was curious, how often do you two get to work together, and creatively, what do you find are the challenges, but also the joys of working with a spouse?
So I think we're tending to do at least 2 or 3 joint books a year,
At least, I would say.
at least. And the challenging thing is we have different organizational styles and different ways of hearing sound. So we will have knockdown, drag out fights. They're ugly about how to notate the sound of a vowel. We're still married.
The one thing, because we have very different instruments, so the most important thing is to agree about the essence of a character. We both implicitly trust each other's sense of story. It's just a question of, okay, how are you approaching this? What's the essence of the character? Because I'm not going to achieve her pitch, she's not going to achieve my pitch. But if you have the essence of the character, that will solve that problem.
Yes. Hi. Thank you very much. How did you keep track of all the characters' voices throughout the whole book series?
Well, I would say, are you talking about Wheel of Time? Specifically to Wheel of Time, we didn't have a process at the beginning. We didn't have half the tools that we had by the end. We didn't have a spreadsheet. We didn't start a glossary until we were several books in. And so sometimes there were like glitches and mistakes, but I have to say, maybe because we didn't note anything down, we relied on our muscle memory and our understanding of the character's intention to recall that voice.
Yeah,
Because there isn't a great way to write this character sounds like this. And the idea of like, I know some narrators, they'll make a voice clip for each character. I'm sorry, I don't have time to make 20,000 voice clips.
No, you because you physicalize the voice and you start to see it. Two things. There's that, and then there's also the author, because he's not selling an audiobook, he's selling a print book. So he's got to remind you, the reader, how does this character sound? So if you look at a lot of the stuff, it's like at the beginning, whenever we meet those characters for the first time, generally we get a description of them, either physical or their voice. And so that's a trigger for you, the reader, if you're just reading the print book, or the narrator. Oh, right. He's the bent over cross-dressing crone. Oh, got it. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so I kind of have two. Okay, it's just following up on these questions about the characters. When I can definitely hear it in your voices when you change characters. Do you have like, are you thinking specific things like, oh, I need to increase the tension in my voice, or are you thinking I'm Matt now?
The second one.
Second one. Oh, okay. All right. The second question I have, watching you perform live, I noticed there's a lot of physicality. Are you doing that when you're recording as well?
Yes, which is why we have to wear silent clothing. And there's nothing more frustrating than having a paragraph long sentence and nailing it, except on the final word, your gesture makes a noise.
Hit the
Because
mic.
it's good so well.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I had a question. How do you find like an opposite sex voice? Because like with a lot of narrators, they don't quite hit that. So like I probably couldn't do a very good female voice. So like how would I go about trying to get that?
Pitch wise, you may want to raise the pitch, although oftentimes I will do female characters in a lower pitch. It's really about the character. You think about everything other than the pitch of the voice. Is this character someone who's confident in who they are? Are they trying to flirt? What is their modus operandi? And then just do that voice. Don't try. I mean, yes, you can do this, but those are extreme choices, and for an extreme character. For the most part, you're trying to differentiate because, again, remember, you're trying to invite the reader's imagination to finish the product. They're going to follow it. Just like when you tell a story to somebody out here and you're saying, then she said this. Well, they know it's not that voice, but they'll start to see it. They'll start to hear it. And as long as you're making that clear from the guy who is speaking, and he might have a higher voice, who knows? It's just a question of you're differentiating the character based on all those other aspects, and don't worry about the pitch.
This was great. Thank you very much. Just one quick question. Do you have any tips for improving your skill of self-direction while recording?
If by that what you mean is doing the best job you can of serving the story and increasing that skill, I would say it's a combination of your outside observations of other stories, watching films, listening to books, reading books, paying attention when you're out socially to how people tell stories, and experience. You just get better. It's like the human nature is every time you have an experience, the next time you approach this thing, it's just a little easier because you're not doing it for the first time. So you're sort of destined to improve. And if you pay attention outside of your work, I don't always recommend that people listen to their own work. If you want direct feedback, hire a coach, send them samples, say, please give me feedback, and let's go from there. But when people listen to their own work, I think they get paralyzed because then all of a sudden they stop telling the story and they start listening to themselves.
I'm not opposed to listening to yourself, to review your own things. And the thing I would pay attention to is, when did I forget that I was narrating the book? And when did I get sucked into the story? And that would be the thing I would say in terms of self-direction. That's the thing you want to go for. The more you are in the story and visualizing what what the characters are trying to do, the less you're going to be thinking about, oh, am I too loud? Am I too soft? Am I too this? It's like, get in the story, because 9 times out of 10, it does not matter. If you are in the story, you've got us. If you're, when you're listening to it, you are forgetting that it's you, game over right there. But yeah, listen to yourself, because yeah, you might find oh wow, I'm in a speech pattern. What the hell am I doing there? And that sometimes is because I'm not in the story. I'm trying to be too technical. So I would say continually try to focus on telling the story.
Michael, you mentioned that there are some books that you feel like maybe you are not able to do the best justice for, like children's books or something like that. I was wondering if there are any genres or types of books that you have a hard rule against, that like it's an immediate veto, or one of you wants to do it and like maybe the other one is like, no, we can't do this one for some reason.
So I won't do erotica, and I've actually done a number of extremely spicy books for the Talking Books for the Blind program at the Library of Congress. I ended up with a lot of remember that?
Yes.
Letters from gentlemen who wanted to take me out to lunch. So I'm not a prude, and I don't have anything against erotica. I just feel like it isn't something that I want my voice attached to at this point in my career. And like murder mystery detective agony porn, I won't do. Pretty much everything else I'll do.
Yeah, I don't know that there's if it's well written, I'll probably take it on. If it's proselytizing and it's something that I either am adamantly opposed to, I would recommend somebody else, just because I think somebody else will do a better job. But I have done books where, no, I disagree with the politics. I disagree with, I've done religious texts, which I'm not in full agreement with by any means. But this is their baby. You give their baby as good a start as you can. And it's not offensive. It's like, no, it's different. There are, more often than not, I'll turn down a book partly because of the quality of the writing, but also if it is a protagonist that's 13, 10, whatever, it's like, you don't want my voice there. Somebody else will do a better job.
Last question, folks.
All right. Well, here it is. When you are creating a voice and a voice comes to you naturally that you know is debilitating for your instrument, what do?
You don't choose it.
How do you create something then that'll work and get that other one out of your head?
You adapt. So you understand what it is you're trying to achieve with the sound of that voice. And then you use all of your tools to create that feeling without wrecking your voice.
Right. That's where the education and the technique come in. You're like, oh, that's the sound. That's kind of the rough draft of the sound. Now, there's a way to make this sound happen. Think about it this way. Babies scream all the time. You've never heard a hoarse baby. Okay? So most vocal choices that you do can be accomplished with proper technique. And a lot of time, proper technique means without the tension that you're imposing on yourself. So it is a question of just, that's where your education comes in, that you find the technique to make that sound in a way. But yes, there are voices which will tire you, certainly. And feel free, I know we're running out of question time, but feel free to just drag me, I can think it aside if you have other questions. We're happy. We can talk about this all the time. So it's, this is our wheelhouse. So please, and don't, you're not imposing at all. This is fun. And this is also, it's like, stories are so important. And and just like we practice everything around, it's like, yeah, you tell stories all the time. That's why you're here. And it's like being a musician. This is a jam session, with musicians, okay? And we just do it. So feel free.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you, Michael and Kate. Thanks, everybody. You got about 30 minutes until dinner. We'll see you then. I love it. I just had to sit here. I would have made them louder, but the volume is on because there's wireless. Whatever sound setup you had last year's was better. I don't know what the inconsistency was this year, but microphones have been dying. We've had more of the humming noises have just been around. Vance met a couple of times. He is something at the amateur audio engineer, and he's just been like, I swear to God, next year we're just getting a box. Thank you. I barely did anything. It was great. And thank you. Oh, so much.
He became a nuclear engineer instead, but okay.